Hey folks, well this afternoon we're going to make some flour tortillas. I took some venison chili out of the freezer last night, threw it in the refrigerator and told Peg, some good old chili burritos sound good for supper tonight. But we didn't have any flour tortillas left, and we don't buy the commercial ones anymore because of that impressive ingredient list that's on them. And then I looked at some organic ones today and I thought, oh geez, I don't know that I want to pay $5. And these things have been around the block a few times too, and still had a fairly impressive ingredient list. But you can make them yourself, so easy, with basically just 4 ingredients. We're going to use the Sunrise, organic heritage, in this case the bread flour, that's all I have, water, salt, and a little olive oil. That's it. So I'm going to use the pizza crust recipe that I'm sure all of you are familiar with now, or at least a couple of you. So let's get over and do the first steps. Remember, I like to do this at the sink, so we're going to take some organic olive oil here and start out with just a 1/4 cup of olive oil into our bowl, and then some warm water going here. 3/4 cups of warm water. So that's a cup total of liquid. And then we're going to add just a teaspoon of salt. In this case, this is real salt. The stuff from Utah, mine from the ancient seabeds. And then we're just going to stir that to dissolve the salt. Now, if we were making our pizza dough, I would have added a teaspoon of our instant yeast at this point. But we don't need it for this. So let's move over to the counter and finish this thing off. So I have my flour in a 50-pound bag here, which isn't ideal. But remember the old scoop and sweep method here. You just reach in with a measuring cup and overfill it, and then just sweep the top with the flat backside of a butter knife. So we're just going to add that first cup of flour into our water and oil and salt, and then just stir it up. We're just going to stir this up to make a slurry using the rubber spatula. Okay, now that we have our slurry, we'll add our second cup of flour. Using the old scoop and sweep method. And then we're going to just hydrate all of that flour. We're going to get this all the flour incorporated into the liquid and make a fairly stiff dough here. And as soon as it's all incorporated in here, we turn it out onto the work surface and then do a little kneading just to get it to the right consistency. And then we're going to take some flour, put it on our work surface here. And then just turn our dough out onto it. And now we're done with the bowl and we're done with the spatula. And then, you recall, we're just going to start working this dough, and as we start kneading it, we're going to just kind of keep grabbing a little bit of that flour that's on the counter as we knead it. And we're just going to keep kneading and grabbing flour until we end up with a nice supple elastic dough. It doesn't take long, just a couple minutes. I'll just keep the camera running, so in case you don't believe me, that's all it takes. So, we're not making pizza crusts with this, so we don't really probably need to knead it quite as long as we would if we were making our pizza dough. And if you remember, when we make pizza crusts with this dough, I make two 16-inch crusts, which of course you wouldn't have to do, but that's the way we do it. And then I'll kind of zoom the camera in here for the next step after I form that dough into a nice ball. Remember, we kind of stretch the skin, kind of tuck it under, form a ball. For this next step, I'm going to put a little flour on this so it doesn't stick. I'm going to weigh that. I have our scale set to grams just because it's a lot easier to divide that than to be messing with pounds and ounces. But we're at 548.5 grams, 549. Okay, so we're going to divide that by 8. 549 divided by 8. So 68.6 grams each if we have 8 of those. So let's say 68 and a half. So let's just kind of pat that out. You can cut this however you want. A pizza cutter works well, or a dough scraper works well too. So we're going to do eight. And then we're going to try to get each one as close to our 68 grams. As possible. You know, this isn't terribly fussy. It's just nice they're a lot more uniform if they're consistent in weight. Yeah, good enough. Next, we're just going to take each of our little dough pieces and once again stretch that skin and stretch them into a ball. And then once we have our 8 little dough balls here, we're just going to set them on this bed of flour and just kind of pat them down into it, flip them over, pat them down so they're coated on both sides with flour. And we'll do that for all 8 of these. And then we're going to just throw a dish towel over the tops of them and let these dough balls rest for 20 minutes. Now that's a pretty important step because it's good to let that resting period do the work for you. It's so much easier to roll them out if that dough's not fighting back at you. Let that gluten relax. So we'll check back in 20 minutes. Yeah, it's been 15 minutes. That's long enough. You can tell when they start to relax that they're ready to be rolled out. I just rolled one out here just to get a feel for the dough and see what you need. Now, remember when we did our pasties, if you watched the pasty making videos at all, we used the KitchenAid mixer bowl to make them into a perfectly round dough. Well, you can do that if you're making tortillas too. Just grab a bowl that's about the diameter of the tortilla that you want. I can see that I have just a little bit of a margin around the edges. I could go around and trim that off, twist the bowl like a giant cookie cutter and twist that off if I was, trying to show off or impress somebody or make them look like commercial made tortillas, but we're not. It's kind of like that rustic look. So we're just going to keep them like that, just a little oblong shaped. So we're just going to take our dough rounds, and then I like to roll them out into a long oval. Make sure you get enough flour on the work surface. They start to stick because when they get misshapen, and then turn it 90 degrees and then start working it the other way. Just remember, when you're rolling out dough like this, you're steering this thing. You're in charge of that roller, and you're strategically moving it where it needs to be moved, not just kind of pressing down real hard and just barreling through it. You just kind of finesse it around and work it around so you get it to about where you want it to be. And as with the pizza dough, we let it rest longer and up to an hour before we roll it out, but it makes such a nice sturdy dough. These really are nice. So I'm just going to go ahead and roll out all 8 of them, kind of like the way we do the pasties, and just make sure there's enough flour on them so they don't adhere to each other. So we'll get all 8 rolled out, and then we're going to go over and get them on the pan and then cook them. Okay, I just got the one left here in case you want to see. One final one being rolled out here. So I have the pan preheating while I'm rolling these out. I just have it on fairly low heat. Just get it pre-warmed. This is such an easy thing to do. They're actually fun, I think, and really not hard work at all. It'd be kind of a fun project for got the kids at home and have them participate in helping to make the evening meal. I think they find that rewarding. So we're just gonna take these over to the stove and heat them up. Bright sun coming in doesn't help much. You wouldn't know it's 10 below zero outside. Yeah, so we like to use our carbon steel, our 12-inch carbon steel pan for these. And so we're just going to kind of watch them, and we just want them to set up on one side, and they'll start to bubble and brown, and of course, having flour on them, the flour tends to burn a little bit, but I don't have the heat all that high on these. So the first one's kind of like making pancakes. The first one's kind of the test, but they don't need to be on there very long. You can see it's starting to bubble up, or maybe you can't see, but it's starting to bubble up a little bit already. So I don't know, a minute on each side or so. Turn the heat up just a bit. And most of the recipes you're going to see for flour tortillas have baking powder in them. I feel like they need some kind of leavening agent, but I don't see the need for it. We're just keeping it simpler, and just those 4 ingredients. Yeah, so that side's plenty done, just so it's set up and cooked through. And then what we will do is set them then on this cooling rack, and pretty much the one that's set on there pretty much cools by the time the next one's stacked on top. And if not, you can spread them out on a larger cooling rack, but you don't want them to dry out. They dry out fairly quickly. So we just want them to stay on the cooling rack until they cool. And then once they cool, I bag them up in a bread bag. And then what we're not going to use tonight, we will freeze away. They freeze away real nice. So I'm not going to get too carried away with this one. It's plenty cooked through. So that's really it, unless you want to hang out and watch me do the whole batch, but I doubt you do. So that's really it. We'll see what they look like when we get done here. So that's all there is to it, to make the best tortillas you can ever eat. These are so good. They're so delicate and light and fresh tasting. They don't taste anything like the factory made ones. And we know what's in them. We know what all the ingredients are. They really took minutes to make. It's just something you don't want to do rushing it. Oh my gosh, it's 6 o'clock. We don't have tortillas. You know, that's not so much fun. But it's 10 degrees below zero outside with, I don't know, some ridiculous wind chills. It's been for a week. It's a great thing to do on a weather like this, especially with the kids. So give them a try. Wonderful tortillas made with wonderful ingredients. So till next time, it's Mark again with Backwood Basics. Let's grow together.